Hi, welcome to MILLSUMMIT 2022. This is Julie Ilowiecki. I'm an LPCMH in Delaware. I'm also licensed in New Jersey. And our topic today is mental health, specifically managing and advocating for mental health in the post-pandemic workplace. So I'll read a little bit about our description today of our discussion. It says the pandemic has almost eliminated the stigma and normalized the importance of managing mental health and mental well-being in the workplace, whether you're back in the office or working from home, or more likely doing both. Still, the need for strong advocates of mental health support has not diminished, particularly given the prevalence of mental health struggles is greatest among younger and historically underrepresented workers. Today, we will discuss some of the tactics and resources that professionals, young and seasoned, use today to help manage their mental health and support their friends and colleagues. Today, I am with Wesley, Demetrios, and Sharifah, and then I'm going to give them the floor and tell them a little bit about themselves. Sharifah, do you want to start?
Sure. Hello, and thank you for having me. My name is Sharifah Polite. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm also a self-love coach because I believe that self-love is the highest form of mental health. I have helped build wellness centers in elementary schools in Delaware. I am licensed again, both in Delaware and Maryland, and to be North Carolina. I continue in the efforts to support marginalized communities, people, and that's me. Have lots of energy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sharifah. We're really glad to have you here. Demetrius?
Yes, good morning. Hi, I'm Demetrius Marsis, and I'm the Director of Behavioral Health for Highmark, and that includes daily responsibilities for teams that focus on utilization management for inpatient treatment, as well as behavioral health case management. And because behavioral health is such a critical theme, I'm sort of involved in most all themes touching behavioral health.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Wesley.
Hi, I'm Wesley Ingram. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm the programs manager with NAMI-Delaware, which means a lot of things, but primarily helping to coordinate trainings and whatnot, as well as like giving presentations. And I also am doing a lot with the social media aspect of it as well. So educating, awareness, and advocating. And I also identify as a peer and as a queer trans man. So for me, a lot of my personal focus too is on the intersection of the LGBTQ plus community and mental health.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Just getting started today. I'm going to look to see if we have any questions to get started. Sorry, I'm having some. Great. All right. Well, one of the main topics that has been coming up a lot during the pandemic and for those professionally with mental health is the topic of burnout and what that looks like for everyone. Would anyone like to speak specifically about burnout and the pandemic and how they've seen it shown up in their profession?
Sure, I'll speak about it. So I guess it's both important to talk about what burnout looks like. So it has to do with exhaustion, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. And I think what it looks like is you're overwhelmed, you're agitated. I think the pandemic really brought people to a point where they were reflective, and it was a mirror to who they are, learning, I'm really depressed. I don't have the best relationships because life was closed down, as we say, and we were in isolation. So burnout has happened. I can even talk about myself briefly and say that I took on close to 40 clients at the time, in addition to supervising several clinicians. And so I had to realize with being home that I was at a point where I needed to transfer some of my clients and or shift some of my responsibilities. But I do think it's a great topic to discuss what it looks like. And in my opinion, for some people, they're just not sure if they're burned out, because we live in a culture where it's hustle and do as much as you can, and use up all your time and don't get any sleep. But I definitely believe that rest is best.
Yeah, this is Demetrius, and if I could add, so part of that is also in relation to the pandemic, is the fact that we were free of a significant amount of distractions, and the distractions sort of interrupt certain aspects of our life. Now, those interruptions can be sort of counterproductive, but they could also be sort of inspiring. Something new is showing up, and so we were in a period of time where that separation from others, that separation from newness, that separation from just that interruption. And so we were then faced with just doing what we do, plodding ahead, one foot after another, day after day. And as Sharifah pointed out, culturally, work hard, hustle, do your thing, contribute, do your part, and that sort of adds up. And unless there is sort of self-care built into that, and self-awareness, because burnout isn't just the sort of thing that you can sort of count on. It surprises some people. Some people have been doing this for a long time, and the pandemic is, sort of provoked it as sort of a surprise, where they have worked hard all their life. And suddenly the difference of working hard in this environment had it show up. And that surprise of it, and not knowing what to call it, because they had a history of working hard. They had a history of taking on more than others, more than they did last week. And that surprise is that other piece of it, that they didn't have words for it because they'd never encountered it before. So it took a long time for their cup to spill over, but the chances are it likely did during the pandemic here.
Yeah, and I feel that the pandemic, especially in like the nonprofit sector, has put like an extra urgency and strain on everybody. So even like Demetrios was saying, people who are already taking on a whole lot, who are used to doing that kind of extra work all the time, it was just like an extra strain of it, and just the feeling of that urgency of like, now more than ever, things are so important to be getting done, and we are in kind of a privileged situation to be able to help people, and so you end up pushing yourself even harder than you would have done outside of this context.
Go ahead, Demetrius.
Yeah, and if I could just also add, I mean, that was Wesley, as you sort of mentioned, the helpers are used to helping, and being out there, and maybe the last one to sort of recognize they need to have that self-care to maintain their fitness to help. But the pandemic brought on the need for more, and everyone stepped up and did more. And once again, that was that sort of aspect of oops, today's the day I'm not feeling it, and why and how, and did we even have the vocabulary to sort of describe it, because it can't possibly be me. I'm immune to this. I've been doing this for a long time. And so the helpers need that self-care as well.
Would anyone like to talk a little bit about how, with burnout and the pandemic, mental health has become a little more normalized? People are feeling more comfortable talking about reaching out for therapy. It's becoming less taboo. What have you noticed with your clients in the work that you do?
Yeah, this is Demetrius. If I could start, I think we still have a long way to go regarding stigma. So even though there's certainly much more openness, there's more sort of vocabulary available to everyone to talk about things like stress and burnout. I'm not sure society has completely turned the corner, in terms of, the labels that come along with stigma, and not just society, but families, and the idea of, people step up and you work hard and you do things. And then when you're not able to do that because whether it's burnout, whether it's symptoms of depression, whether it's stress, whether it's anxiety of, where to place your foot, the next step you're trying to take, all of that, I think it's positive that there's more talk about it. But I think we really need to continue the work, make sure that, our communities have the language to describe how they're feeling, the forums to do that safely, and with that, then the sort of the assessment and the triage to the right levels of care if that's necessary.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And also, I feel that while it has been a really good positive move forward in what we're like in these conversations that we're having, at the same time, I think it's become a lot of buzzword, where we're saying things like burnout and self-care and things like that, and not really going past that into, that sort of actually putting in things in place and programs and whatnot for people to be able to access, more acute care that they might need. So I think that needs to be the next step in the conversation, is to actually getting the help instead of just, maybe recognizing it, but going, there's still too much around this. I'm not comfortable reaching out, or I don't need that yet, kind of feeling around it.
And for those that are joining us that maybe haven't gotten therapy before, that aren't professionals in the field, what do your clients share with you with their new experiences potentially before or during the pandemic with getting therapy? Anyone have any experiences they can share with that?
So I would say a lot of clients have neutral experiences, positive experience, and of course experiences that they're not too excited about. And one thing I would say happens a lot is so many therapists push medication. And I'm very neutral about medication. I believe that individuals can thrive without medication, but it is based on where you are. I do believe that medication can be helpful. The experiences that happen, I found that people feel safer because I think what Wesley said is that some of the next steps that we need to have is speaking, and Demetrius said also, speaking about it more, but also therapists modeling the behavior. In my experience, I've had therapists who don't truly believe in therapy. They just believe in letting you cry all day or letting you vent for most of the time, and are not giving steps to actually implement what could happen for you to have the life that you want by design. So for me, it's important to model the behaviors. It's important to do the work within myself, because only when I'm doing the work have I seen throughout my 10 plus years that clients have done much better. However, fear plays a big part in it also. Some clients just aren't ready. And I think it is our role to just be patient and love them through this journey and this process.
I think what Sharifah also pointed out, that there are clinicians out there, and not all of them are good fits for every client, and that there are clinicians out there who are quite diligent, They are trained and they maintain fidelity to evidence-based practice models that are sort of research-based. And others out there have heard about them. They use bits and pieces in a very eclectic style that doesn't necessarily hold to the fidelity of these models. And we know that some of these models, are quite effective in brief periods of time to help relieve, what that patient's experience is, and that it's critical for clinicians to practice in an evidence-based way using measurement-based care, and with that, engaging their patient and giving them some understanding of what the journey is going to look like. It's not it's not sort of unlike that if we're prescribed certain medications, you know, that this might take 3 days before you're going to see a change, you know, or it has these potential side effects. We have that same opportunity with patients where they're coming in because there's stress, but in reality, we're going to start touching on traumas from 20 years ago that they have forgotten to talk about, that may emerge and make this much more complicated today. And that shouldn't be a surprise to a patient. We should be well informed, well engaged in informing them of the process, doing rather complete assessments of their need, beyond just sort of what they're describing as their presentation. So there's a great deal of responsibility, and each one of us then in essence sort of bears that sort of responsibility of what's that patient's experience. And if I wasn't a good fit, will they choose to exit care, or will they pursue somebody who might be a better fit, the next time or next week?
Yeah, and I would say that is probably a really huge barrier for anybody who has like a marginalized identity too. I know as a trans person, it was really hard to find somebody who like really understood me, and especially in any time where the care, you have acute care like inpatient hospitalizations and things like that, you don't really have a choice of who's helping you, and it becomes a really difficult kind of situation to get through, and then it doesn't really want you to continue on. And so while it might not have gotten to that level, although sometimes it does, that the first one or two therapists that you might try out and it's not a good fit, and it becomes a lot harder to find, or to find within yourself to keep going and to find somebody who is, especially when the options might be limited.
I know I've heard a lot of feedback from clients that may be looking for therapy since the pandemic. And we have a question from Stephanie too, so I just want to bring that up. How long should you give the therapist a chance to see if they're the right fit or not?
I would say 3 sessions. I would say 3 sessions.
Yeah, and I guess I would add to that if your gut right out of the gate is that I'm having a hard time sitting across from this person, that maybe you ought to run with your gut feeling, and you really ought to understand what their plan is, what the model of care that you're about to experience, and sort of read up on that. You don't have to become the expert in it, but you really ought to understand what your course of treatment is going to look like, and your therapist, your clinician, really should have the capability of being able to describe that course of care for you.
You can go, Wesley, and then I'll speak afterwards.
Yeah, and I would just add that it's definitely okay to ask questions too. Like if it's the first few sessions and you have those kinds of questions, then definitely ask, like, about, because they might not have thought to tell you, but they might still have that in, in the back of their mind, so that they're, so it might still end up being a good fit, but you don't know unless you ask.
And I would just follow up on that because that's exactly what I was going to say. Come to therapy with questions and be open to asking any question you want. I am very open and transparent with my clients. And I also have been to therapists, of course, and I've asked therapists, have you been to therapy? Now, I don't believe that everyone needs to stay in therapy forever, but if you want to, then that could be your mental health prescription. That's more than fine. So I think what's important is having questions and having ongoing questions, even if you're feeling like there's a conflict with you and the therapist at some point, being willing to talk about that. But I think it's the therapist's responsibility to assess you, to know you well enough to know, maybe their body language is saying something that may be cueing some form of conflict because, this is what we're trained in.
Thank you, Sharifah. Also, when I start off with clients, I tell them right off the bat that this is your time, right? This is your money, your energy. This is not about me. It's about you. And if you don't feel like we're a good fit, it's okay to communicate that to us. I know it can feel conflictual to say to someone, I don't feel like this is a great fit, but know that you're your own biggest advocate, and expressing that to a seasoned trained therapist. They can find someone else in their practice if there's someone else. Also doing research. You can go online. Most of us are online. Our specialties are there. You can ask the practice or the outpatient counseling agency, is there someone that has experience with individuals who are trans or individuals of specific faith or background or morals or values? And that's important to look for that and to really advocate and speak your voice on finding that good fit if it's important to you. I was wondering, with that question, Sharifah mentioned a mental health prescription, or I'm sorry if I framed that incorrectly, Sharifah. Could you tell us a little bit more about this prescription that you were talking about?
All right. So I thought of this a few years ago on my social media, of course, because I'm your therapist's favorite therapist. And what I decided is, it's mental health and physical health. And because mental health is so much of a stigma, but we should be dealing with it as much as and talking about it as much as physical health, then we need a prescription, which is really just self-care. What does that look like for you? For everyone, it's different. Of course, I can talk about the things that I do for my mental health prescription, but I tell clients all the time, if standing on your head works, then stand on your head. Too much of anything can become a problem. So we do need different things of diversity in our mental health prescription. But things that I can think of would be, maybe seeing a therapist once in a while or regularly. What that looks like also, what your coping skills can be, maybe your hobbies, the importance of spending time with positive people. So your mental health prescription is similar to what I would call a self-care plan, but I call it a mental health prescription.
Okay, we have another question from Christopher, wanting to know more about how to get services from your employer. Speaking about being, our summit coming from the perspective of being a professional in the workplace, wanting to get help from your employer. We also talked about disclosure, how much to disclose. Where do I start if I'm working for an agency, if I'm working in the field, feeling burnout? How do I get help? Where do I start?
So in Christopher's question, there's a reference to an EAP. An EAP, if your employer has it, is a good place to start. Your benefits, if you have benefits, through your employer, your mental health, substance use disorder benefits, and the plan that's associated with it. So if you're having a hard time using or accessing the self-service kind of tools that are available in terms of finding a provider, Highmark in particular, we have case managers that you can ask to be placed in contact with, and the case managers are in touch with our network, and we have ideas of who has access sooner rather than later, or who can meet some of the unique needs or interests that you have, and we can work with you to help access um, those providers that may be available, as well as also help fine tune what you're looking for. An example would be many people think that they may need to access a psychiatrist when in reality, psychiatric time is probably scarcer than most in many areas. And, our behavioral health needs are on a continuum, and your needs can probably be met by some other credentials, and we can help you sort of sort that and get you started on your care journey. And I sort of emphasize that it's a care journey. You may find that initial clinician wasn't a good fit, and you may need another, or you may need additional, parts of of care, such as medication management, further assessment, other levels of care, such as a partial hospitalization program or an intensive outpatient program. And, your benefits, if those are available, would be there to access, and your health plans are there to help you gain access to that. Because we certainly are interested in individuals using their benefits, getting them, getting individuals healthy, staying healthy, because that's sort of what we're here for.
Yeah, and I think that the most important part of the employee benefit aspect of it is that I feel like it kind of needs the buy-in of everybody, in the sense of, if it might be, it's really great for people to have that access to that, but if they still feel like they're going to come up with that stigma that they can't mention it to their supervisors or coworkers or whatnot, then it's not going to be very helpful. They're always going to kind of turn to those external supports. So even if that's not something that you might need in that moment, just especially if you're a supervisor or whatnot, making sure that all your employees know that that's a thing that exists in your company, that they can access, and just, trying to normalize the discussion of mental health as much as is possible and professional in the workplace would be kind of the best, I think, to help encourage people to actually use something like an EAP.
And my tip for that, which would happen prior or at the start of you coming into an organization, would be, and this is because it's a networking conference, connecting with your supervisor, making sure you're not just a number. Because once you have that connection with your supervisor, more than likely you may be able to get the buy-in if you are having mental health distress or anything of that nature. So my tip is, continue to connect. That doesn't necessarily mean you guys go to happy hour, but build a relationship with your supervisor and the other employees around.
And if I could add, organizations have human resource professionals, and I want to emphasize the professional end of things. They're well trained, and if you're not getting the satisfaction from the folks that are immediately around you, those human resource professionals are available, and they're trained to manage and handle the needs of the employees. And with that comes certain expectations of accommodations, privacy, etc., and that they may be best equipped if you're not finding that satisfaction. I think the key is, if you start testing the water and it may not be a good fit for you in terms of your immediate supervisor, there are others in the company that can be good assets and very helpful for you.
And just to clarify, if anyone's not sure what an EAP is, what an EAP is typically, organizations have specific programs with insurance that you can reach out and get services from a licensed professional. So sometimes it might be 5 sessions, and then you can be referred out if you need more longer term care that are covered. So I think from an organizational standpoint, it's feeling comfortable and normalizing that would be letting your employees know that this exists, either sending out emails or saying, hey, you have a free session, please use it, try it out, make therapy, like normalized therapy in the workplace. And that might make it, some people may have no idea that that's even a benefit to them. Also, I was wondering, Wesley, about NAMI and like, what are those? So a lot of us are in Delaware or in the surrounding area, maybe other states. How is NAMI a resource as well? And how can professionals use that to get linked to care?
Yeah, so NAMI-Delaware runs what's called a helpline. And it's not a crisis line or anything, but basically during, our normal business hours, you can call in and ask for resources about really anything related to mental health. So we get a wide variety of calls, but one that's really, most common is just, how do I find a therapist, or, how do I find a psychiatrist and whatnot. So we can also definitely help walk you through that and point you in the right direction in terms of where you can get connected to care.
Another great point Sharifah brought up was connecting with your supervisor. And so I know the question of boundaries has come up. How do you suggest to your clients or patients about maintaining professional and personal boundaries in your mental health in the workplace?
All right. My favorite topic. I'm so excited. No, but the art of saying no. Don't forget, guys, it is a full sentence. So for me, most importantly is learning that professional boundaries, I don't really call those professional boundaries only because we have our job and we take it very personal. What I do is very personal to me, although I know what you mean when you say that, Julia. I'm Julie. But our professional boundaries, generally, I think finding out and having the awareness to know, am I burned out? Am I taking on too many responsibilities? And talking to your supervisor about that, learning, is this, I wouldn't say within my job description, but people tend to know that you're a workaholic, and your coworkers will even allow you to take on their responsibilities. So just speaking to them and advocating for yourself is important in a professional setting. Learning that this is your career and everyone doesn't have to be your friend. I think that's a boundary that sometimes we have to have for individuals, because that may not be a good fit for you to have that person as a friend. And having that discernment, I think, is important. So those are a few for me when it comes to professional boundaries. And I'll let someone else speak.
Yeah, and so when I hear the sort of the question about personal and professional boundaries, I immediately go to what is being shared in the workplace, and to that end, it's sort of just sort of imagining that if your workplace has bulletin boards, if you're not comfortable with it being posted on the bulletin board in the corridor, in the lobby, that may not be content that you want to share openly and broadly at work. And that's sort of a personal boundary that you should reconcile. In terms of professional boundaries, as Sharifah said, sort of how do you set those limits? How do you set those limits within the workplace? And how do you set those limits in the workplace in the most sort of tasteful way? So there's ways of saying, I'm at my limit, or I can't be the solution for your management style if you can't get the rest of the team to perform. I can't always be the answer. How do you do that without alienating those around you? without sort of calling out somebody else's struggle in the process and being part of their problem and sort of disenfranchising yourself at work. So there's sort of styles of how you say this and where you say it, and then within organizations of where you can get support to establish those professional boundaries, et cetera. So some companies have mentoring opportunities where you can learn that, as you hope to grow within a company. But there's, for me, there's some of that distinction in terms of, personal versus professional. And the personal is more on the content and who's aware of what's going on with you and how much is going on with you and how broadly that information you're comfortable with that going.
Yeah, disclosure is always really hard, and I think difficult line to kind of walk in a workplace setting. I think the biggest one is just knowing that you don't have to disclose any of that information if you don't want to. It's not necessary, but at the same time, too, there shouldn't be any shame about it if you want to, especially from like in an advocating sense. But also, I think even just being able to simply say like, I need this time off to see, my mental health professional, in the same sort of sense that you might say, I need this time off. I need this time off to see the doctor or the dentist. Those kinds of things really help to bring stigma, like to decrease stigma.
I would also say if you can walk the journey of being authentically you, then it's a lot easier for people to be willing to understand and comply with your boundaries. In a world where we want to be liked so much, I think it's difficult because you're hot, you're cold, you're orange and blue, and people are not sure how to read you. And so then at that time, they're not sure if your boundaries should be more rigid or more flexible or where you are within your journey. So advocating for yourself is very important, but seeing a mental health professional so that you can become more authentically you, because we like you for being you.
And following up on that, if you're not sure if boundaries is a problem that you struggle with, that's a great place to start in therapy. I speak to a lot of clients. A lot of issues in relationships and burnout stem from poor boundaries. So that might be a place to start. And a therapist could provide that support to you to help learn and give you education about your boundaries and how to make them stronger, how to make them work for you. So just a great place to start. I was wondering too, how if an organization doesn't have a program, or I don't want to involve work, what would you suggest reaching out and just where to start the journey of looking for a therapist and like actually in this area? What would you guys suggest how to start that process?
Well, this is Demetrius. I certainly have a bias. I mean, so your health plan is a phenomenal resource, and when you have available benefits, there are sort of, as I mentioned before, self-serve options. That may not be as more refined than, here's my zip code and, here's access and here's a list within so many miles. Still a good starting point. And then further from there, looking at their web presence. How are they describing themselves? Looking at reviews. And, now certainly, that can be helpful, but once again, they can be skewed based on who takes the time and effort to, write reviews. But that's a good starting point. And then if you are having some of those sort of access issues that you'd like to see somebody sooner than they're representing, that they have time for, your health plan may be able to help you find others that have more immediate access that can meet your needs.
I would agree. And Google is your friend. It's not your best friend, but I think Google is your friend. But also, hashtags and social media, that's always a start. Referrals from other people, if you're willing to talk to people who have actually been in therapy. So I think those are, but of course, your insurance, if that's where you'd like to start, definitely. I think it's a great start.
Yeah, and if there's anything specific that you want to talk about, or if there's maybe a specific type of therapy that you're interested in, that can also help refine the search. But we always like to start with insurance too, just because it can also be really hard to like find a therapist that you're like, this seems like the perfect person, and then realize they don't take your insurance. So it's kind of not. So you know that they're kind of out of your price range.
And just circling around, I know Sharifah mentioned she's licensed in different states. So it's important to find a therapist that's licensed in the state that you're in so they can provide you therapy. But using social media, if there's a very specific focus that you have or treatment that you want, telehealth is now a great resource to be able to provide that. That's one positive thing from the pandemic that has opened up and normalized the use of telehealth. And we know that it is just as effective as in-person therapy. From research. So if you find someone on social media that is licensed in your state, that's also something that's opened up. We do have a question from Brian. It says, what are your ideas regarding the place of a person's faith, i.e. working with professional spiritual counselors, pastors, rabbis, etc.? Anyone want to start with that?
Well, it's absolutely a great starting point, depending on, where you are in sort of the continuum of wellness or not feeling well. You may need somebody who's, trained a lot more precisely in some of your mental health needs. But once again, all of our needs are on a large continuum. And absolutely, starting is probably the most important part. And if you're most comfortable starting in sort of, with your pastor, with your rabbi, with a good friend, and then, being directed, moved on, helped to find other resources, or resolving what was going on with those conversations and sort of, pastoral care or pastoral counseling. The other piece, and you mentioned this, once again, is the telemedicine. I think that's critical in terms of access. And what we're also finding with some of the telemedicine providers is that they are not just bringing, access to that channel of therapy or treatment. They're bringing fidelity and to evidence-based models of care. So they're locking this in, and they're guiding those clinicians. They're training them. They're supporting them to manage that. And we're seeing on a sort of a larger scale the sort of fidelity to evidence-based practice. So you might get a very refined treatment experience that's very focused and may take care of you now quite nicely. And hopefully you have a great experience so that if you have a new need down the road, that you'll know where to go and how to access that again. And it could also be a little more cost effective in some respects, because you're sort of in and out taking care of what you need, as opposed to, you keep showing up because there's an appointment on Thursday at 2 from 2 to 3. And, you may be connected with a clinician that's not quite good at closing the relationship, but will remain available to you. And you really need that. You need somebody who can be intentional, very purposeful in terms of refining the care and treatment for you and your needs, and have an end in sight, and and a plan for you to end, as well as leave you with good self-care skills and capabilities.
Yeah.
Wesley?
Yeah. And I would add that faith communities can be a great place for support and, extra support. And I think sometimes we think of it as kind of an either or, and it doesn't have to be. As long as your faith community is supportive of mental health and is not trying to tell you that, oh, it's that it's a sign of losing your faith if you go or anything like that. Those are kinds of, that's when it becomes an issue. But as long as your faith community and your faith leaders are being openly supportive and saying, if you need help, you need help, and are helping to connect you to that extra level of care with a mental health professional if they need to, or if you need to, I should say, then it is definitely a great place for support. Also, I happen to know a lot of social workers and like clinicians who are also reverends and whatnot. So it's definitely, I think it really goes hand in hand with what people kind of are looking for and need.
And I'll do a little plug here. I work for a nonprofit in Delaware. It's Jewish Family Services. And we serve individuals in the community, anyone. So you don't have to be Jewish to be a client of ours. That's a common misconception. You don't have to be Jewish to work there or to receive services. It's just a great outpatient counseling service that we provide. We have a lot of other wonderful programs too. So individuals that need extra assistance, like with case management, etc. But that's something we get a lot. Oh, do I have to be Jewish to get counseling? No, it's just that we have our Jewish morals and that we look at, right? So a lot of other faiths also believe the same things, that people deserve to be treated with respect, right, and dignity, and they're the expert on their level of care. So also do a little more research if there's somewhere that's close to you, although it may look religious. It may just be that there's core beliefs that they believe in with the faith, and that may be able to find a good support with someone there as well. Okay, I know the question we had was self-care is a big buzzword, right? We've self-care, right? We hear that a lot during the pandemic and now in our culture. But what does that actually mean? And how do we find things that support us in our mental health?
So for me, I would say self-care actually means looking at what it takes for you to manage yourself in a more positive way in your journey to health. So that's what self-care looks like for me. So again, it could be anything. Anything that's somewhat positive, let me say that. We're not talking about mind, mood altering substances. We're not talking about overeating. So self-care does look like things that allow you to find space to cultivate a more positive relationship with yourself. I'm not the person who says self-care Sunday, because self-care is literally every day of your life. Boundaries are part of your self-care. Saying no is part of your self-care. Having quality time with yourself is self-care. Having hobbies, as Wesley said already, being with positive people. That's one of the best mental health hacks you can have. Being with positive people who support you. So looking at your circle and continuing to assess your circle, that is self-care. Yes, getting your nails and hair done is all great, everyone, but there are so many other things that we need to do to take care of ourselves every day. Prioritizing your time. People will abuse your time if you don't know. They will put on all of their responsibilities and then allow you to be drained, burnt out, and depressed and aggravated. So being able to actually manage your time in a way that says, I like me, I love me, that's self-care. Hopefully that answered your question. But I know these two great individuals will add on to it.
Yeah, that's so for me. One of the pieces that I emphasize, and it's a small component of self care, is the idea of routine, the idea of sort of ritual, and I think that was when the pandemic rolled in, that was sort of the biggest challenge. Folks were suddenly told that you're not showing up here anymore. You have to do this, and that immediately altered some very fundamental things. Like, what time do I need to wake up in the morning? You know, and what time do I need to be out of the shower? My bus leaves here. Oh, and on my way to the bus stop, my little self-indulgent coffee shop stop, or the smile that I get from the clerk here, or that thank you, or whatever it is, or the person that I routinely see that sit around me on the bus, whether I chat with them or not. These are all sort of things that are familiar, and we were certainly thrust into sort of great unfamiliar. Even though we got locked down, we're at home. We're certainly familiar with home, but we weren't familiar with spending that much time. And the people in our home weren't familiar with spending that much time with us, and sorting out our boundaries even within our own homes is, okay, who gets this corner to do their schoolwork? Who gets this corner to do their, the work that's going to pay the bills, as they're figuring out connectivity. So as we navigated all of that and become much more capable, after these years, it's still important to have those sort of routines, those sort of personal rituals that are self-care, but that they're also part of that sort of clock of the day. These little things, these little mile markers that you go through each and every day, and the people you see, the people that you expect to see, the voices that you expect to hear, the sounds, the changes in weather. What am I going to wear today? You know, the high today is going to be 50, and oh, by the way, that happened at 5 a.m. How do I dress for my return home? All of those things got changed, and we had to adjust. Some of them were pleasant to adjust to. Gosh, I don't have to worry about an umbrella. Did I have it at the bus stop or not? And am I going to get soaked today? And some of them were, more adjusting, required more adjustment, and surprised us.
Yeah, my number one self-care is always a reminder to myself and to all my friends who are working and whatnot is use your time off. Make sure to take time off. I know it can be hard, especially when, we're working from home already too. So I think there's already kind of a feeling of, you can get more done, etc., but you don't need to. And if it's going to really stress you out or really start to limit you, even if it's technically possible, you don't have to. So I think that really goes with the saying no boundary too. But yeah, definitely making sure to use your paid time off.
If I could add on very briefly, I think the reason routine is important to people because it creates safety. Think about when you put your keys at the front of your house and you decide you didn't that day. Then you're running around your house looking for your keys and you're in distress. It creates safety. Routine creates safety. 40% of the things we do are automatic. We're on autopilot at times. So we need those routines also to give us some comfort, to give us the safety. And that's why a self-care plan, whatever that looks like for you, is important in your mental health journey.
Yeah, no, everyone just mentioned great ways for self-care. And as we wrap up today, anything else that you'd like to share would there be a good takeaway from today on how to support your mental health, how to support your friends, your colleagues?
I would say in the support realm, sort of be a listener and be available, be accessible, and don't necessarily race to solutions, because then you can come off as I'm telling you what to do. Be a listener. I think that's critical. And the other piece is within that listening is have grace. Not everybody's well equipped to describe what they're going through. They don't have the vocabulary, and people are going to choose words poorly. And as a listener, you're there for them, not for you. And please be able to stay toe to toe with somebody that you're willing to listen to.
My takeaway would be some check-in questions that you can answer for yourself on a daily to find out where you are. So one would be, what's taking up my headspace? Another one would be, have I ate, have I drank, or have I slept lately? What can bring me joy today? What am I grateful for? And I think those are just some things you can say and well, not say, and answer for yourself to find out where you are. On anxiety scale from 1 to 10, where's my anxiety? Who do I have to support me? You want to find out where you are so that you can continue to, again, walk in this journey and build the support to continue to walk in that journey.
Yeah, and I think my takeaway would be going back to just the small and simple ways of being like an ally in the workplace. If this as just making sure that people know about the resources that are available, whether that's the company resources like the EAP or any resource groups that your company might have. You making sure people know about external resources like NAMI-Delaware's Helpline and things like that. And, just sharing that kind of awareness information and being open, and like Demetrios was saying, being a listener, all those things people really pick up on and notice. And it is one way that you can even kind of be a leader. And I feel like a lot of people are just waiting for that one person to start doing that and to kind of like step up. So any ways that you can show that you're in kind of an ally and to really support and promote mental health and open conversations around mental health is really important.
Yeah, and just I want to piggyback on that, not being afraid to ask for help, whether it's internal or external, leaning in on your resources and knowing you're not alone. This has been hard for everyone, no matter what your belief system is, your faith, where you stand politically, any of this, all of this has been hard for all of us. And so together we can have empathy, hold empathy for each other, and using this platform as a way to network and build a community for yourself. If you don't have that community, we need resources, we need support. So, trying to find that is a great way. So we just have a few seconds left. We just want to say thank you so much for those of you that have come today. Thank you so much for your wonderful questions and comments. And thank you to our speakers for taking your time today as well. And if you look up our speakers later on social media, on Instagram, to connect later. If you have any additional questions, if you want support, we're here for you. Thank you so much.